Welcome back to the 172 Academy test model, Desert Tempest in RAF What If Scheme. Thank you for joining me today on Air Tempest. We have to have a slight delay leaving the airport. Apologies while maintenance comes through and takes care of some problems. Through the magic of editing, this model's back in service. Beautiful. One of the things I wanted to do with the Academy Tempest, just a demo model, and that's what its intended purpose is. And as you can see here, it's been through a few paint jobs, mostly testing out Mission Models paints back in the early days when that first happened. So this model is now ready to get kind of a regular paint job, if you will. Again, playing up on the strengths of the fact that accuracy isn't that important right now in terms of demonstrating both painting and weathering in this particular size. And going through the process of proper airbrushing and getting stuff down. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider the like and subscribe. And those of you that are familiar, if you recall, this is all from a live stream. And if you go to the channel page, you'll see a bunch of 85, 60, 85, 86 plus whatever live streams. And this goes back to, I believe, episode 59 through the 60s, about 20-30 episodes ago. And what I'm doing now is editing this down for your easier consumption, bite size, if you will. So apologies for a little bit of the filming. It is iPhone camera and a live stream conversation, so it gets a little rough at times, and that's okay. But we get the information across pretty well, and what we're trying to do here is prep this model for some new paint to begin with. And the Academy kit's pretty solid. In terms of surface detail, it's a good demo piece, and I'm going to use the Mission Models paints here. We're going to start with some Middlestone. And what I'm going to do here is actually, I really enjoyed the desert colors that I placed on this. And we know Typhoons kind of had a test scheme, and of course the Hurricanes and Spits all ran around in this color scheme as well, along with the Kitty Hawks, Tomahawks, Fred Hawks, Joe Hawks, and everybody else in between had this color scheme. So I figured, why not put this on the Tempest? And I'm probably one of the few in this world that really doesn't care what's underneath so much in terms of overpainting a model. So if it seems a little like, hey, what is he doing? Well, number one, it's really to demonstrate some things to you guys in terms of laying that coat down really nice and thin and light and getting your colors where you want them to be without building up too much opacity or thickness. And this is crucial for aircraft. In any kind of panel frame type machine, you want really nice, thin, tight paint to work with, and that's going to be the superior way to go. So I'm laying down this Middlestone as my first pass. A little bit of the lower colors are shown below, but by the end of the day, it's going to be a little bit of appreciated, and nobody's really going to notice that. But secondary is I had some of these handy little stencils from Solid Scale for some armor work, but it actually works pretty well for kind of just the general context of I need something that looks like what it's supposed to look like without spending a lot of time masking up a paint scheme, if you understand my meaning there. Is that, this was really kind of a down and dirty on a live stream. Let's get some colors down in a replication of kind of what the scheme sort of looked like. And that's all that was. But for the dark earth color, what I'm going to use though is a kind of I don't know, I've been doing it a long time. I've been painting like this for a while. However, the idea of what I'm doing here might be new to most of you in terms of the modern vernacular is a filter. The modern vernacular is, harmonizing your paint job after you spray it. One thing I've done for many years, and this comes from my art and design training, is you can do that in the colors themselves if you mix the colors up together as you go. So I put down underneath a sky tone, and when I mixed up the Middlestone, I put a few drops of the sky tone into that. And then when I got to the dark earth color, I put a few drops of the Middlestone / sky mixture into the dark earth color. So all three colors kind of have a base tone of each other inside them. And what that does visually is it just locks the colors all in a little bit more harmoniously without the need to get into a secondary conversation about filtering. So you can see there that the outcome is good enough. Let's get going. I mean, that's what this was. And honestly, I throw down some markings a few days later and we're ready to rock and roll and get this aircraft weathered up. But as you guys should be well versed now, Coach is adamant that this is an important step for us to take, and that is you got to check out your references. And these famous airplanes of the world books are an excellent resource for most aircraft, most famous aircraft is kind of what the title says, but most of the heavyweight aircraft around the world between World War II and the modern era are covered by this book series. So they're good $20, $25 reference books. I recommend them highly. They're in Japanese, but they're the best at resource material, to be truthful. They really do an excellent job with that and finding what we need to look at. But I'm still not done. And what I did was, alongside the P61 videos that you guys are watching, this one here also was going to be like a complete walkthrough to make this a little bit more of a fully fleshed out project for demonstration purposes. And I'm pushing this on you guys in terms of practice what you preach, take the test model conversation seriously. For example, if I'm going to do a Tempest, then I've got my Edward Tempest kits. I've got, whether it's a profit pack or I'm putting, Quinta decals in this stuff now, and all the modern 2023 vernacular of aircraft modeling. Go get yourself a $15 Academy Tempest and work everything out that you want to do. The reason for that is it saves you the anguish, on your $100 model, and you're working out stuff on the really cheapy piece. And secondary to this is also one thing I find very useful is a little bit of a pro tip. If you're comfortable working between scales, in other words, if you're going to do a 48 or 32, grab a 72 or even a 144 if it's a larger aircraft, and work smaller, because what that will do is that'll crank your footwork down, if you understand my meaning. It'll tighten you up, and that'll bring your weathering effects in the scale even better. Because when you transfer that back to a 48 or 32, etc., you're going to have a better control of your brushes because you've just been working on this in 72. And so your muscle memory is kind of condensed down, and that's an effective little trick to improving your work long-term in your major scale, which nowadays, as we all get kind of older, is 48 and 32 kind of conversation. So that's kind of also part of why I do 72. Lastly, it's also easier to film on camera when you're doing live streams. That's kind of the other part of it. But nobody cares about that because that's my problem. That's the thing I got to deal with. But again, hip checking ourselves constantly throughout the streams. We're always pulling in the references through kind of every major stage to see where we're at, make sure we're kind of on point. At times, to be transparent, we're not trying to replicate our photos one-to-one. That's really important when we get to, like I said, our major projects. But in this conversation I'm working out, how do I weather a Tempest in these colors, number one. So it's not really a common thing, but even if you're doing 109s or Spits or anything in the standard schemes or Mustangs, or even the Navy Birds, you're going to have a variation of experience, if you will. So this isn't common for me to do, coming from a lot of armor and some other, subjects. So working out and problem solving is kind of what this is. To sell it to you, that's the power of OPR, which is what you're seeing on camera right now. Oil paint rendering, the purpose of it, the reason for it, the vernacular, the terminology, the whole spiel is because it's the primary problem-solving weathering solution in the most efficient process that we have to date. And that's really what it brings to this conversation. Because you can dance between the scales with it. Just like you see me dance with the bristles there. It's really that conversation of about what am I supposed to do here, here, and here in a very, very specific conversation, on that panel line, around that bolt detail, around this wing walk. You need to have answers. And oil paint rendering gives you the fluidity and the transparency and the opacity to maneuver all the areas of the weathering that you need to do with that small palette and a few brushes. So don't underestimate that when, even when guys say oil, weathered with oil paints and stuff like this, you're still rendering out the surface. You're still finalizing the visuals in an illustrative conversation for the viewer. That's what all of this is. So you're taking history, you're taking your references of the machines that you're interested in, the designs that you like, the color schemes that you prefer, and then kind of the theaters of war and or action that it's seen to really come up with kind of your end game of A, B, C, and D to get to the X, Y, and Z. And that's what you're seeing here with the live stream commentation in terms of these demo models provide you with kind of just the information process of, well, how do you do that? It's just not as easy as just pulling out the airbrush and some stencils and black basing something out and then, airbrushing and slapping down some oils and wiping it off. It's just not how that works in terms of you're trying to get very specific with something. You're trying to answer the conversation with specifics, and that's what the OPR part really brings to the table, probably more than anything else. The secondary part of that is I don't want to say secondary because it is kind of a primary issue, is, you know, it's a non-toxic, it doesn't smell, you can work for hours like this. The only thing that gives out in my conversation is usually the back goes, the eyes go after a couple hours, and I have to stop and take a break. But the work itself, the oils, the bottle, the brushes, the paints, all this kind of stuff, super easy to work with long-term, multiple sessions. You can come back and forward, do a small section, come back the next day, continue on. And that's kind of what I teach in terms of, you see this in the P61, you see it in all the armor stuff, of course, but in terms of the aircraft specific, you know, conversation that we have, what does section by section mean? And in some cases, it can be a wing, you know, top or bottom surface. You know, here I'm just kind of focused around the wing joint, wing walk area, but I'm trying to showcase to you, okay, well, when we look at the references, look at what the panel lines are doing. You know, look at what's actually going on the surface of some of this aircraft. And then what I'm trying to do is translate that over to the project that I'm working on and trying to combine all this stuff together using OPR as my problem solving tool so that I can create these looks on top of the paint job that I've gone through with the chipped and the worn out. If I'm putting primers down, if I'm you know, working my way through primer colors down to bare metals and stuff like this, I want to know what it is that I'm trying to do. So I've got to go back and forth to the reference photos and kind of get a game plan for that. And that's really what this is. And then working with the kit surface detail, which you guys have heard me talk about quite a bit now, where we have these trench lines and panel lines that they put in the surface, which sometimes is an actual. So what do you do with it? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of really what you're seeing here in this conversation with the Tempest. You know, it's not in actual, well, it is. It was and is a lot of fun because I'm off the stress zone. There's no real stress going on here in terms of I'm concerned that I'm going to ruin this project, and that's a secondary level of consideration when you have an inexpensive test model. You know, it really lets you flex your muscles and your brain power in terms of how do I solve this panel next to the engine that's in 2 camo colors plus a wing walk color, and how do I weather that up? You can walk yourself through that without concern of fear, without the proclivity of like, oh my gosh, I've just ruined this. Because the other myth of the hobby is you know, you haven't ruined anything. Truth is, you can fix 99% of everything that we do or we think is a screw up. And the reason I don't really get into that too much is you're seeing it on camera. Control and precision. Control and precision. Everything you see me do is like I treat every little section by section as its own miniature model. And that's kind of a key aspect to this. What is oil paint rendering? You know, I'm rendering out that particular starboard side wing root, not concerned about anything else. I'm focused. All I want to do is get this whole area worked out. And then once that resolved, I can move on to the next one. What happens from that? The residual. My mistakes are small, my fixes are easy, and I keep in the flow. And that flow state is what allows me to weather this effectively and very realistically with a bit of artistic flair to it, which is where you get that, oh man, that looks so cool conversation from, because you put in a little flair into your work, and that's where this all kind of comes together at the very end for everybody to enjoy. So that's really kind of what I'm going on about in the live stream, and obviously what I'm ranting on about now. So, but the nitty gritty of this is, you know, it comes back to this stuff. None of this happens in a vacuum. You have to have a pretty good grounding of information, and I don't care if it's a P38, to be honest with you. I'm looking at the panel lines, I'm looking at the grit and the grime and the way the oil works, the way the human maintenance works, the way the engines bleed out, the splatters, the various effects that happen. And a good photo is a good photo, and that's kind of how I take it. And coming over to this project and putting in some of the love from that over onto this is really where my head's at. So for example, the wing walk section here, it's in a dark gray on top of a two-tone sand and brown camo. Well, I want to weather just the wing walk. So how do I do that? Well, OPR and the brushes, it's control and precision. It's applying a dark, more opaque gray to certain parts of that wing walk that are still not chipped fully, and then blending that in to create kind of a little bit higher contrast, if you will, between the fades, the boot scuffs, the dust that get embedded into this kind of really rubberized matte paint area, and so on and so forth. And that's really what you see from an ABC conversation, but it plays into the entire conversation of all letters of the alphabet with your references and what you're trying to achieve per project. So don't take it so much as this is we're getting super hardcore on an RAF Tempest in a what if Desert Scheme. You know, that is part of what this is, but I'm also just kind of going through the educational process of brush control. You know, variation between the paint and the thinner that's on the brush. So when you see something go down that's a little more opaque, there's less thinner involved, and then swapping out to the blenders. And I did make a note in the captions, but if you're unfamiliar with the RSP channel, the red brushes there are the blenders, so they're clean, and they're just kind of coming in and jogging in the work that you're doing with the oils as you apply it. And the one thing I'm surprised I haven't said yet, so you know, correct me, you guys should be yelling at me right now. One of the things that I really like to do with oil paints in terms of a teachable conversation for you guys is the light to dark process. So what you've seen me do over the course of this video and many others on the channel is basically, and in the books too, it's really kind of the heart of everything in terms of weathering, is I start with kind of my lighter tones first, and I use the base colors of the project to kind of guide my hand. You know, I've got some sand camo, I've got some exhaust stains, I've got some grease, I've got some grime, I've got some typical maintenance, and I'm using my reference photos for kind of the color choices. You know, I need to kind of refade some stuff, so I'm applying some dust, so on and so forth. And again, it's a live stream, so you're seeing my head and me move around. I'm talking to people, so it's a little bit janky in terms of the video call, so I do apologize for that. But the point of it really is, you know, putting down a light tone. This gives your dark something to layer over. This creates the age. Weathering is the age of the machine, and so on and so forth. So, and it works for everything. You know, don't be fooled that you feel like you have to airbrush, you know, the varieties of different tones for, say, the markings, and you gotta change stuff up, you know, depending on the color, and you kind of don't. Your palette has all the colors you need. It's the same brushes, the same oil paints, same thinner, and all I'm doing is working my way through section by section. So I consider kind of the roundel up there on the top kind of its own little section, so the blues were kind of worked in there. And one trick to the eye, push a dark up against a light tone. So if you treat your base paint as the middle range of tones, and I've explained this before, but to reinforce this concept, a very, very effective way to weather. How do you weather, etc.? The base core value. Light to dark is one. And the other one that I really like to push on you guys in order to achieve that and execute the light to dark is consider your painting, your airbrushing work, the middle range of colors that you can work with. So even in the marking conversation, even if it's a decal or a decal for my Commonwealth friends, understand that blue there is the middle tone. And so I can add a dark blue and a light blue to that. Same thing with the sand and the dark earth. I can add various tones of that around that to pull in kind of a range of contrast out of each little section, which is kind of what you see going on from a technical aspect. To loop back to light to dark, what you're seeing on screen right now is exactly that part of it. I don't go in with dark panel lines, and I've said this a few times now to where you guys should probably be pretty familiar with that. Why? Because that backs you into a corner almost immediately. And I've said this again many times, and what happens is if you start with dark panel line washes, you only got one way to go, bro, and that's not going to be the most successful answer for every project. So if you start light to dark, work your way up, and then apply your darks towards the end of the process, control your panel lines to mimic what you're seeing in the photos, you're going to have a very realistic slash kind of flare leveled artsy look, if you will, that'll really give your model a little bit more pop in terms of what is it happening here with OPR in the hobby right now. What's going on with all of this? Because it is around us everywhere now, and whether it's my fault or not, which I'm probably going to take the blame for, but it's really trying to break this down for you guys to absorb at a deeper level so that you can sit down and more intuitively recreate this yourself, which is really my end game with all of this right now. Is that the point of doing a low stress model is to have fun with it, to showcase the ideas for you guys so that when you go to your work, you can take it as seriously or as non-seriously as you want to, depending if you're a competitor or if you're just having a good time or you just want your work to just kind of move forward and get a little bit better. And we can talk about blending and some other stuff in future videos for sure, but also, again, I keep showing you guys on purpose, the hairdryer is really important. Also, rotate your eye level. That's another way to really judge your work, and you want to really, come through and pay attention to what the lights and darks are doing and how, again, if you have any mistakes, stuff to clean up, it's easy. You've got a nice working window with oil paints. They're beautiful because they go, full opaque or really, really transparent. You can do a lot of effects with them. So, again, thank you guys for your support. I hope you've liked this one. We'll probably do the port side wing and a few bits of the fuselage and call it a day on the Tempest, but again, it's a great demo work. It's A lot of fun, good stuff, light to dark. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to my boys over on Patreon. The page is really blown up here in the last few months. 4K videos on the regular, graphic design drops, book news, discount on the RSP website, etc., etc. Check it out. I suggest you go grab some. Pretty cool. Link in the description. Thank you. Later. Bye. See you. Okay, I'm out. Peace.